What is up, everybody? I am not Dieter. I am not 6'8". I am not broadcasting live from the Bay Area. I am not going to be touting Jordan Reed today. No, we don't have Dieter. He's up in the mountains, stranded apparently at Lake Tahoe. We got Joe Holka, who is consulting our Line Movement CEO on his 4 live final lineups today. So we had to bring in a man to cover Dieter's big shoes, to cover Holka's medium-sized shoes. It is, of course, James McCool. How are we doing, James?
Oh, I'm okay, man. I'm not 6'8" either, and I probably don't have as big of feet as Dieter. But I'm gonna try to fill those shoes. I'm gonna put in some cotton pads on my toes and try to fill in the extra inches that are missing there. I'm excited to be back on though, man.
Yeah, dude, where you did the show a few weeks back. Always fun to get in the weeds with you on this stuff. We also did my Friday DFS strategy show earlier. So I feel like our chemistry is just absolutely palpable, James. I think people are going to really enjoy our back and forth today.
Yeah, I can taste our chemistry through the screen, and I'm sure that everybody else can also taste it, maybe even smell it. I'm not really sure how the senses are feeling this morning, but regardless, I hope that people enjoy the things they're tasting this morning.
Yeah. So before we get too sensual with our descriptions here, I will say, without these guys, I am juggling a lot today. I'm going to be telling you guys the betting implications. I'm going to do Inactive's Corner. We are going to do some heavy lifting here today on this big Week 15 slate. So let's just get right into it. If you guys got questions in the chat, feel free to send them. Also, subscribe, like the button. We are putting this channel on our shoulders today, and we need you to reward us with a sub and a like. James, let's start here. Chicago Bears, Minnesota Vikings. Vikings 2.5-point faves. We got a 46.5 over under. Real quick before we dive into the DFS, do you have any betting leans, things you might touch here?
Yeah, I think it's always really easy to bet against the Chicago Bears, especially when they're facing a team that's actually competent. The Vikings have been one of the most efficient teams in the league in terms of the passing game over the last 5 or 6 weeks or so. So being able to take the points with the Vikings and bet against the Bears is always something that I'm willing to do. And if I'm doing that, then what I think is that the Bears are going to be inefficient and bad. So I'd prefer to take the under as well.
There you go. Let's get into this game, which I think is going to fly a little bit under the radar from a DFS perspective. I do see Dalvin Cook's ownership coming up a little bit compared to earlier in the week. The wide receivers are going to catch moderate ownership. Allen Robinson, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. Are you interested in this game for DFS? Because there's definitely some pieces I like here.
I don't know that I'm super interested in stacking it, but I am interested in Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook, you just mentioned that his ownership is starting to trend up a little bit, but I still think that Derrick Henry is going to far out-own him, probably double his ownership at the very least. You can expect Derrick Henry to be somewhere between 28 and 32% owned, I would think. Derrick Henry, I don't think, goes over 20% owned at all. And what's interesting about that is that Dalvin Cook actually has better overall opportunity than Derrick Henry has had on the year. Expected fantasy points wise, Dalvin Cook is expected to score around 32 fantasy points per game, Derrick Henry around 30. So those targets kind of add up. And as an indirect pivot off of Derrick Henry, I think that Dalvin Cook makes for a fantastic play in DFS.
Yeah, I definitely agree. One thing that had been really working in Dalvin's favor the past couple of weeks was Alexander Mattison was inactive. It does look like he'll be good to go today. Does that throttle down your touch projection for Dalvin at all?
Nah, I mean, Dalvin Cook has been their bell cow pretty much the entire year. Granted, there is a reason to think that the coaching staff had come out and said that they were working him too hard, so they might want to pull him back a little bit. But he's somebody who's averaged somewhere between 25 and 30 carries in regular games when they're able to have a lead. So I would still expect him to have that carry projection. And the thing that matters the most really is the red zone work, where he gets the vast majority of the red zone work over Alexander Mattison. It's not just about between the 20s. So I don't think that I'm really worried about that for Cook.
Yeah. And one last thing on Dalvin Cook, because a big topic of conversation, like you said, is going to be if you are fading, Henry, you're probably playing Dalvin Cook or you're loading up on high price wide receivers. How many times, if we run this slate 1,000 times, how many times do you think Dalvin Cook has more DraftKings points than Derrick Henry today?
Well, I can tell you that I run simulations on a player base level for 5,000 times. And in those 5,000 times, Derrick Henry is the overall finisher at running back 34% of the time. Dalvin Cook is the overall finisher 24% of the time. We'll get into Alvin Kamara later, but he's at 24% of the time as well. So those three are kind of like the big three. Derrick Henry has the higher ceiling just simply because it is what it is. Like, that's what Derrick Henry can do, 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. But Dalvin Cook certainly is going to outscore him quite a bit.
And that, I want to bring that up because I think those percentages, my anecdotal back of the napkin, that sounds about right to me. And the whole point here is the overconfidence that we get on one specific play relative to the other, just because of those 10 percentage points. Those mean something, but not in the necessarily the ownership gap we are going to ultimately see between them. And that's kind of what we're hinting at here. Some of the other interesting things in this game, I think, are the punt play tight ends. Irv Smith is priced up at 3,600, but I doubt anyone's going to play him based on the ownership I'm seeing. And then the more popular punt tight end is going to be Cole Kmet here. It looks like he's coming in at around 10%. Jimmy Graham is going to play today. He was questionable during the week, but Kmet has kind of passed him in snaps and routes. So he's definitely interesting down there. Do you have a tight end you like in this game?
Not Cole Kmet. Especially if people are going to be playing him when he's like popular. I mean, he's going to be more popular than Rob Gronkowski. He's going to be more popular than Logan Thomas, Johnny Smith, TJ Hawkinson. Like, he's probably going to be more popular than Mark frickin' Andrews. I don't want to take a shot on Cole Kmet. Irv Smith, I did play last week. When there's no Kyle Rudolph, he makes for a very good play, I think. He gets a lot of the red zone work, and he kind of plays into the Adam Thielen role where they'll look to him. If Dalvin Cook is not going to be the one scoring touchdowns, it's either going to be Adam Thielen or Irv Smith in the red zone. So I don't mind Irv Smith at all, and I think that he actually makes for, if you're stacking this game, you can go Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, and Irv Smith Jr. and have kind of like a more salary-friendly way to stack this game than taking Thielen and Jefferson.
Yeah. And I mean, I will say, if you want to use either Cousins or Trubisky, they're going to be extremely low owned there. So you definitely have my permission to do that if you want to get freaky in some of the big lottos. Let's move on. Detroit Lions, Tennessee Titans. We were just talking about Derrick Henry. The Titans are 9.5-point favorites. There was some uncertainty about Matthew Stafford playing. He's working through rib injury, hand injury. This over-under is now at 53.5 with the news of Stafford playing. Earlier, I saw it at 51, so it does look like it's maybe getting some movement here. Any side or total you would like to bet here?
I don't know that I trust Tennessee to cover 9.5 if Matthew Stafford is playing, but my lean would definitely be on taking Tennessee and the points at 9.5. I do think that Tennessee wins this game, but there's just too much juice to take on the money line. So I would much prefer to take the spread if I'm going to take anything, but I'll probably just fade it.
Yeah, I agree. Those both seem a little tough to stomach. I'm not seeing a ton of value there. Let's hop into DFS, the aforementioned Derrick Henry. Because of that price tag, we're not going to see him in the 40 to 45% ownership range. Also, Alvin Kamara opening up as kind of the premier running back play is pushing his ownership down just a little bit. I'm going to guess he's going to come in somewhere to 20 to 30%, depending on your contest size. I think I know the answer, James, but it sounds like you are close to a full fade on Henry today at that ownership and price.
Yeah, I just think that it's bad process to take the highest owned player as well as the highest priced player. So I think that if Derrick Henry is going to be 30% owned and being as expensive as he is, what that does is it makes it so that you're kind of like forced into the same roster construction as the rest of the field that takes Derrick Henry. I mean, if you take Derrick Henry, you kind of have to take Leonard Fournette. You kind of have to take Emmanuel Sanders. Like, you get pushed into this way of building in very specific ways that I just don't like to be kind of pigeonholed into. That being said, he's a fantastic play. I don't think that he's a bad play in any means. He could rush for over 200 yards here very easily. But just for a DFS perspective and for the market values, just not somebody that I'm really interested in taking.
And again, I want to kind of hammer this point home because we get all kinds of crap and be like, how could you fade Derrick Henry? But let's help people understand what he has to do to smash at this price tag and this ownership, right? If he even gets 100 yards in 2 touchdowns, that's what, 25 DraftKings points, assuming no catches. That doesn't get there at this price and ownership.
Yeah, and the other thing about this is that there are other running backs that can match his output, right? And if you're taking him at 9,500, what you're saying is that he is absolutely the best by far play on this slate without even a shadow of a doubt. Like nobody can even touch him. And that's just simply not the situation here, right? Like we went over the percentages earlier. There are two of the running backs that are in the same range of being the top overall scorer, not even like a top 5 overall play, not even matching his median outcomes, but being a top overall play. So when you're taking somebody that is 9,500, not only does he need to score 30 fantasy points here to be, worth the price, but he also needs to outscore at least 5 other running backs on the slate. And there are a lot of running backs that are in really, really good spots this week. So it's like in the circumstance of the slate, he's really not that great of a play at the price.
And the other kind of tiebreaker for me on this, and we've seen it in previous weeks where Dalvin Cook was going to be the big chalk, but he was in the late game. So you get the benefit of the information. You can start your builds with the chalky, high price smash play. If you're behind, you pivot off of them. If you're looking good, you can let it ride. I would say Derrick Henry would be way more viable if he was in the 4 p.m. slate, knowing you could make some pivots off of it. But having the mega chalk early is just a spot I don't love. So yeah, I built 4 lineups so far this morning. I do not have any Derrick Henry. Rest in peace to me. Congratulations to you guys. I do think this does open up some interesting leverage opportunities here. If Derrick Henry doesn't get the touchdown, who could it be? Could it be A.J. Brown, Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith, the defense? Do you have any ways you would like to leverage this ownership?
Yeah, Tennessee actually passes very nice 69% of the time in the red zone. So that's where we know that most touchdowns come from. It gives them an expected passing touchdown of 2.29 and an expected rushing touchdown of just 1.03. So the passing game actually looks really, really good here, right? Like Tannehill with Corey Brown with AJ, or Corey Davis and AJ Brown. Even Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith is going to take the touchdowns in the red zone where Derrick Henry can't score them. I think there will be people that say that AJ Brown and Corey Davis can't play together, but it's worth noting that that game where Corey Davis had like 35 fantasy points or something, AJ Brown fumbled the ball like on the 1 and should have had a deep touchdown and would have had 18, 19 fantasy points there. And both of them would have been very viable in GPPs. So I really do like the passing game here a lot.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And then heading over to Detroit, obviously Stafford playing is a big boost for all these skill position players. You got DeAndre Swift, who looked great in his first game back from concussion. I think we could even see his role grow a little bit more. He was only playing around half the snaps last week. He sets up as an interesting tournament pivot for me. I think TJ Hawkinson is going to fall in this no man's land with people paying up for Andrews, people paying up for Kelsey, and then punting down with guys like Kmet. So Hawkinson's intriguing. And then you can always go back to Marvin Jones, who no one ever wants to play, but seems to get a ton of targets and a ton of air yards every week. Do you have a preferred bring back if you did say double stack Tannehill?
Probably TJ Hawkinson, just because it makes it so I don't have to worry about the tight end position anymore. But if I want to try to get Travis Kelce in there, then it's going to be Marvin Jones. I do like the point that you brought up on DeAndre Swift, though. Swift has been very efficient when he's gotten touches this year. And like you said, he only played about half the snaps last week. If you can expect him to have somewhere between 15 and 20 touches, I think that he makes for a very good pivot away from the Titans. And if DeAndre Swift is getting a lot of volume, that probably means Titans aren't scoring a lot of points. That probably means that Derrick Henry is not finding his ceiling. So DeAndre Swift, fantastic GPP pivot.
The nice thing about Swift, I think he's pretty insulated to game scripts. Even if the Titans get up early, he's going to be that pass catching back on the field for them in garbage time. You're not going to have Adrian Peterson out there, when they're down, 2 touchdowns. So I think Swift is a really, really nice play and get you on some different builds there as well. Because like James was talking about, when you're fading chalk, you're not just fading the play, you're fading a chalk construction. So going down to that mid-tier running back range is going to get you pretty unique as well. Let's move on to Seattle versus Washington. This is a game that's kind of flying under the radar, not getting much attention here. We only have a 43.5 over under here. The Seahawks are 6.5 point favorites. I know there's some concerns about Seahawks being able to stay upright with this nice Washington defensive line. Are you going to take the points here with Washington, or do you think Russ can cook a bit here?
Yeah, I'll take the points with Washington. Pete Carroll doesn't really want Russ to cook. Like the coaching staff has come out and said they'd rather run the ball more. And I think that last week people are going to look at that and say, oh, it's back into Russ season, but it's really not. Like they're going to gear up towards the playoffs and they're going to start using Chris Carson. They have Rashad Penny coming back. They have a full roster of running backs now that they can just throw out there and spam into this Washington line. And I think we probably see that. I don't think it's going to be a game where Seattle's able to blow out Washington by any means.
Early in the week, when I was looking at ownership, Terry McLaurin, just how he was projecting in this matchup, it looked like he was going to be higher owned. I think because of the value opening up, because people going studs and duds with those Saints guys, McLaurin is now falling kind of in this dead man range here at 6,600. He's very interesting to me. And of course, I always love DK Metcalf. That mini correlation is really the only one I circled for this game. Do you have any love for Terry or DK here?
I have love for those two and those two alone in the passing game here. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that you really need to get that much different. And people have been like talking about how do you choose between Metcalf and Lockett all year. And earlier there was a conversation about it, but DK Metcalf has just blown Tyler Lockett out of the water. I mean, in terms of fantasy points, in terms of fantasy points per touch, fantasy points per snap, in terms of targets, red zone usage, ADOT, like everything, DK Metcalf just annihilates Tyler Lockett at this point. He's the wide receiver one of that offense. So if you're making a secondary stack, then it's certainly DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin. The only thing that I worry about that is that Terry McLaurin's really good, but I don't know that Dwayne Haskins is going to be able to come back out and be efficient enough to get him there. I know they did it early in the season, but that's a pretty small sample size of Dwayne Haskins being able to do that. So I'm a little bit worried about that, but for sure, if I'm taking anybody at receiver, it's Metcalf and McLaurin here.
Yeah. And like you said, it is small sample size stuff. I did see some stuff getting passed around that McLaurin actually has a higher target share with non-Alex Smith quarterbacks. So part of that makes a little bit of sense. Alex Smith, maybe a quarterback that can go, if I'm going to get my hand in the dirt here, goes through his progressions a little bit more, finds these other guys, these kind of younger, inexperienced guys will lock in to their number one option. So I could see it here. And Seattle secondary hasn't been anything to write home about. Terry McLaurin in the air yards by low model, seemingly always getting the volume and a nice market share of air yards there. So yeah, I do really like McLaurin either as a mini correlation, and I even have him as a one-off in a lineup as well so far this week. Let's move on here from this game to the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens 12.5-point favorites here, really starting to get rolling. Over under 47.5. So decent amount of points expected to be scored here. Are you going to keep taking the underdog points, or are you going to bet the fave?
No, I'd bet the fave here. The Baltimore is just like back on track now. After the whole COVID thing, it really looks like they've been able to spark their offense. Lamar Jackson looks like the one that he was last year instead of the one that he was in the middle of this year, where they were having a whole bunch of negative, a lot of negative variance, and teams were kind of guessing their plays. And it looks like they're just saying, screw it, Lamar, just go out there and win games for us. They're not even trying to box him into anything. So the Ravens look like the Ravens, and the Jaguars are the Jaguars, and Gardner Minshew's not very good at football or other things in life. So yeah, I'm just really not a fan of the Jaguars here.
Producer Jordan was looking at where the sharp money was coming in, and both the public and the sharps are on the Ravens here. So not too much love for the Jags. Maybe we can find some love for them in the DFS streets. Obviously, Lamar Jackson projecting as a great play. Mark Andrews projecting as a solid play. We are getting Marquise Brown back. He was on the COVID list. They did activate him. That double stack hasn't really hit much this year, but if it were ever to hit, this is a nice spot for it. And then on the Jag side, we got, James Robinson. He has been just a portrait of consistency this season. And these wide receivers are cheap. You got Laviska Shenault, 11 targets last week. Keelan Cole getting a ton of air yards. DJ Chark, ton of targets and air yards. Do you have any love for a Jacksonville bringback if you are playing the Ravens here?
Yeah, the one thing that I do want to say about the Ravens really quick is that it's not even Marquise Brown that we care about anymore. It's Willie Snead. Willie Snead has out-targeted him, or at least had as many targets as he has in every week since week 8, except for one, where both of them have played, right? So Willie Snead has been the more consistent and the higher upside wide receiver between the two. Marquise Brown is just kind of like a one-trick pony. He looks a little bit like Sammy Watkins to me at this point. So I prefer Willie Snead. Mark Andrews is the red zone guy. So if I'm going to go anywhere with a double stack, it's going to be Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, and Willie Snead. As far as the bring back, I like DJ Chark a lot. DJ Chark has not been very good with Mike Glennon, but he is a much different wide receiver when Gardner Minshew is back there. Gardner Minshew loves him some DJ Chark. So I don't mind going with Chark as a bring back at all. And in fact, one of the lineups that I built this morning has just a secondary correlation of Willie Snead and DJ Chark.
There you go. I like that. And, one guy we should mention as well is J.K. Dobbins. Of all these kind of rookie running backs we're starting to see break out down the stretch here, he's the one getting, the least amount of pub, at least on DraftKings. Obviously, I think Dobbins is a much better play on FanDuel, where his lack of targets isn't going to hurt you as much. But man, if this pie is big enough here, and we've seen Mark Ingram get phased out of the offense as of last week, I mean, J.K. Dobbins could be a really nice tournament play here, even on DraftKings at 5,900. Also, you do have to worry about Gus Edwards. He's going to get a lot of those goal line carries. But any love for the Ravens running game in this spot?
Yeah, the Ravens actually have one of the highest expected explosive passing rates in this game. Jacksonville can't defend against explosive runs. They allow a lot of them above league average, and Baltimore obviously has a lot of explosive runs above league average. They're a very good running team. J.K. Dobbins has not really had the rushing attempts that I'd like to see. 13 rushing attempts last week, 11 rushing attempts the week before, but he does have 7 red zone rushing attempts over the last 2 weeks and just no touchdowns. It's been Gus Edwards getting the touchdown. So I think there's probably some touchdown variance going his way that could come up and get Dobbins into that 20 fantasy point range. He's not somebody that I would feel good about in single entry, but I think that if you're playing in a large field GBP, I don't mind Dobbins at all.
I see the chat asking about Fournette, asking about Patriots running backs. We are going game by game. We haven't got to those games yet. We will touch on those in a second. Eli wants me to give more Laviska love. I know, man. I know. I should give more Laviska love. I actually don't mind him at 3,800 coming off an 11 target game, but I think James makes some good points about DJ Chark here as well. Let's move on to this next game. We have the 49ers and the Cowboys. Kind of a weird game here. Over under 45.5. The Cowboys are 3.5 point underdogs here. We're going to get a couple backup quarterbacks. The Cowboys are cheap, James, but first of all, anything you're doing here in the betting markets, this feels like one of those games that could be gross or just sail over the total. I don't have a read on it.
I'll take the under on it, just mostly because I think that both of these teams are really bad. And I don't really think that either one of them is going to be efficient enough to move the ball with any kind of confidence against either side. So it should probably just be a lot of 3 and outs and bad punts on like the opponent 1 yard line. And I think that's where we'll be.
Yeah, we're going to get 2 kind of chalkier options in this game, and then everything else is going to basically not be owned. The 2 chalky pieces are going to be Brandon Ayuk here at 6,300. He's been just an absolute monster with Debo out, even with Debo in. I mean, he has 49 targets over his past 4 games, and he's actually getting used deep down the field, too, in a way that Debo wasn't getting used. We also have Michael Gallup, who is kind of trending as one of the more popular chalk plays. I think his ownership was going to be even higher before the Saints guys opened up, but he'll still come in the 10% range. Give me your thoughts on those 2 chalk pieces, and then if there's any other more contrarian plays you dabble with here.
Yeah, Ayuk is really the only guy that you care about on the 49ers, right? You really can't utilize anybody else in this offense. You can't utilize the running backs because a lot of them are healthy. Nick Mullins sucks, and Brandon Ayuk is really just like the one guy that is getting targets. He had 16 targets last week. 6,300, that's not a bad price, but I will say again that these are 2 inefficient offenses, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if we see a whole bunch of 3 and outs, a whole bunch of inefficient play, and this game ending like 14-10 or something like that. I could see that in the cards, which doesn't really foster a lot of upside for anybody involved in the game, right? On the other side, Michael Gallup is certainly the wide receiver that I would prefer from Dallas, only because of the price. If price wasn't an option, then it's Amari Cooper. The one that I do not want is CeeDee Lamb. The reason why you want Michael Gallup is because he's gotten so much red zone work over the last couple of weeks. He's been their main red zone threat over the last couple of weeks with Andy Dalton in at quarterback, and I don't see that stopping. So at 3,500, he has the highest upside simply because he has the red zone expectations. But outside of that, like, I really don't like this game. And I want to hear your thoughts on Zeke at 6,100 because that price is kind of jarring. But he hasn't surpassed 0.65 fantasy points per touch in like a decade. So I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, I have like kind of a ingrained bias against Zeke. I mean, the unbiased takes would be, well, first of all, he was limited all week. It sounded like he shouldn't even play. and they were still talking about, making sure he gets out there. The other thing more concerning to me is he had virtually the same amount of touches as Tony Pollard last week. He had 14. Tony Pollard had 13. Pollard also got that receiving TD. So you're talking about a guy who didn't get in a lot of practice, is banged up, is now in basically a full-blown committee with Tony Pollard. I just think there's better contrarian running back plays. But obviously, if you tell yourself a story about him getting 20 touches in this matchup at 6,100, he would be a smash. I just don't know if he gets there. One other note here, someone was asking about Raheem Mostert. He was looking dicey earlier in the week. He is good to go. I'm projecting kind of a 50-50 split again with Jeff Wilson Jr. Do you see any way for Mostert to wrestle away more of the workload?
No, I think that it's probably going to be a split. They just prefer to do a split. The 49ers have always wanted to use multiple running backs, so I think that it's probably going to be a split. And that being said, it's been easy to run on Dallas. If you want to take a shot on Raheem Mostert, I don't have a problem with that. Just don't do it in single entry or 3 max, because that's way too volatile, I think, unless you're just playing all the chalk at every other position and maybe just want to pivot from Leonard Fournette to Raheem Mostert. But the Dallas can be ran on pretty easily. So if you're into that, if you want to take that risk, go ahead.
Yep. People starting to buzz about some inactive news coming in. Do not worry. I will take flight. I will head to space. We will do Inactives Corner here in about 10 or so minutes, maybe a little less than that. But let's talk about the Texans and Colts. Until then, over under 51.5. Colts 7.5 point favorites. We were talking to LaMarca earlier in the week on the Line Movement Show. The Sharps just bet the Colts every single week after week. Are you with them here at 7.5, or do you want to take the Texans with the points?
Yeah, I'm with them at 7.5. The Colts, they're a really, really, really solid team. Like, they're really, really good. Their defense is super solid. They have an offense that is consistent, not high upside, but consistent. It seems like they have a good running game at this point, utilizing Jonathan Taylor. They have T.Y. Hilton back to looking like T.Y. Hilton. And the Texans have Deshaun Watson and then a whole bunch of water boys and some ducks. So that's what the Texans are bringing to the table, and it's really, really bad and really, really inefficient. And I wouldn't ever bet anything for the Texans right now.
Have you anything won? I normally don't ever learn these defensive guys' names, but football guys have told me DeForest Buckner is an important part for this Colts defense. I heard he was questionable. Have you heard anything if he's playing today?
No, defense does not matter. And defensive players certainly don't matter. Except for if there's one player that matters, it's Aaron Donald. That's it. Like, if Aaron Donald misses a game, then you should bet against the Rams. But other than that,
If someone in the chat, though, let me know if you guys have heard on the Buckner news. I will pass that along. For DFS, this game is pretty interesting. Jonathan Taylor is going to be fairly popular. T.Y. Hilton is going to catch some ownership. And then Brandon Cooks maybe a little bit here. But I think there's a lot of good plays in this game. I'm interested in Deshaun Watson. He looks like one of the better, ceiling, low ownership combinations that we're going to get on this slate. Lots of stacking options with Cooks, QT, Hansen, Akins, and then also there's some leverage spots on the Colts as well. If you want to go to Michael Pittman Jr. as well, he, I think, is still closer to kind of the 1A, 1B with Hilton than maybe the ownership will indicate this week. Do you have any other plays you like in this game?
Yeah, I was going to mention Pittman being somebody who the public really are not on. Like, the field is not on Michael Pittman, but he has been kind of lockstep with T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton's been a little bit better, but there's been a lot of variance going in Hilton's favor over the last couple of weeks. And I think that Pittman is somebody that you can certainly go to if you're trying to fade T.Y. Hilton. Jonathan Taylor is probably the best play in this game. If you're looking at just play the best plays, Jonathan Taylor is a very good play. Averages just over 0.9 fantasy points per touch. And when he's getting 20 plus opportunities in the game, he's going to be a good play. He's 7,200 this week, but he's a touchdown favorite over a team that's super inefficient and has been ran on most of the year. So Jonathan Taylor, I think, is a very, very good play this week in DFS. But what I did want to say is that nobody's really on Houston, and this game has a 51 over under, and Houston, they're bad. They're really inefficient, but Deshaun Watson's very good, and they do have Brandon Cooks back. And I think that this could be a spot where the public is just kind of writing them off a little bit too quickly. And for DFS purposes, there's a lot of value in that. They are one of the teams that has the highest passing touchdown expectation this week. They pass 84% of the time in the red zone. Gives them an expectation of 1.95 passing touchdowns, which is pretty good. That's top 5 on the slate. So I think there's a lot of value in Houston.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there too. One of my main lineups I made has Deshaun Watson at quarterback here. I guess the tough thing for me, I think Akins is one of the better punt tight end plays right now. He dropped a short TD last week, which would have boosted his ownership. He still had 6 targets. He's only 2,800 and not going to be highly owned. So to me, if you're choosing between Akins or Kmet, like take Akins every single time. Do you have a preference on QT versus Chad Hansen? Obviously, Cooks is probably the best play, but I've been kind of wrestling with those 2 other guys.
Yeah, Hansen has had 7 targets in back-to-back games, but I do think that because Brandon Cooks missed last week, that's probably inflated. With Brandon Cooks coming back, I assume that Chad Hansen is probably going to drop back down and be somewhere in the 4 or 5 target range, and I would prefer to have Keke Coutee. Just because he knows the offense better and he's got a better rapport with Deshaun Watson. We've seen him in the past have a meaningful role in this offense. We know that he can handle 9 to 11 targets if he has to have them. So I prefer that side, but Hansen has looked good. So it's kind of hard. I would prefer Coutee, but it's just a lean.
That was slips, James, the better rapport there. We've been watching too many Twitter news notifications here. Let's see. Let's move on to Tampa Bay Bucks, Atlanta Falcons, and then we will get to Inactive's corner after we break down this game. People wanting to talk about Lenny Fournette. We will do that. But first off, we have over under 49.5. The Bucks are 6.5 point road favorites here. People do not like betting on the Falcons when they don't have Julio Jones. The wheels appear to be falling off here, or do they, James?
Yeah, It's hard for me to like Atlanta, period. I just think they're such a bad team at this point, and they're kind of going through this interim coach, and they don't really know what they're doing. Their defense is bad, and Tampa Bay is a very, very good team, and they have been very, very good against bad teams this year as well. So I would much prefer to take the Buccaneers side. Actually, I think the Bucs should be like 10-point favorites here, and I'm not really sure why they're not.
Reacting to news, the slate has been flipped. We are gonna talk about this because I have to put on my spacesuit. I have to get ready to go to space, but boy, am I gonna have my work cut out for me here in a couple of minutes. But let's keep talking about this game here. There are a few plays that seem like they are kind of standing out to me, and I don't think this game is going to get a ton of ownership. I don't love the Fournette play, but I don't mind Chris Godwin, or if you have a preference on another pass catcher. I think Russell Gage and Hayden Hurst look like values again with Julio out, and we know Calvin Ridley is going to get a ton of targets. How are you attacking this game for DFS?
Well, I love Leonard Fournette. I'll say that. I think that they're... No. Well, look, man, I mean, I think there are a lot of people that are saying like, oh, well, he's not a very good running back and he's been inefficient and he can't score touchdowns. And Bruce Arians is like an untrustworthy person and like all these different things. It's like, okay, sure. But this is a $4,500 running back on a touchdown favorite team that likes to run the ball in the red zone. He's been somebody who has been getting the receiving work most of the year outside of Ronald Jones. So he's already got the receiving role, and then he should step into somewhere between 14 and 18 rushing attempts. So you're telling me that he's going to have 20 plus opportunities. He's going to get the red zone work. He's going to get the red zone receiving work, and he's 4,500, and people don't want to play him. And like, he should be big chalk. He should be big chalk. But in my aggregate sources, he's only coming out to 20%. So I think people are just talking themselves into not playing Leonard Fournette at 4,500 on a touchdown favorite team.
Here's where I'll push back. What makes you think he's going to get all the receiving work?
I don't think he'll get all of it, but I think it's reasonable to think he gets 3 to 6 targets.
Yeah, to me, what I don't understand is if you think Leonard, I'm not saying you, I mean the collective you. Sure. If you think Leonard Fournette, is deserving or would get 3 to 6 targets, why wouldn't he have been the pass catching back last week with Ronald Jones when they made him an inactive and they decided they wanted to use LaShawn McCoy and the rookie Keyshawn Vaughn over him? So like in my head, it makes sense that they're like, all right, he's going to get the early down work for Ronald Jones. I do agree he has more pass catching upside than Rojo would in this spot, but I just feel like McCoy is still going to get a lot of the passing down work.
I think that's a fair point for sure, but Leonard Fournette's 4,500, so that downside is already baked in, right? Like 4,500, if he gets 16 rushing attempts and he gets a touchdown, like cool, even if he doesn't get any receiving work. So yeah, getting the receiving work is really just like the cherry on top of somebody who is projected to be a damn good play. and it's just one of those things like last week, DeAndre Washington should have been massive chalk last week as a min-priced running back going into that Dolphins running back spot where they have used just one running back all year. They have not liked to use multiple running backs. And he only ended up being like 20 to 25% owned in some contests. And I think we see the same thing with Leonard Fournette this week. And it's like, where did the DFS industry that I know go that would play any cheap running back that's going to get massive volume? Like, where is that DFS industry, man?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Jordan, producer Jordan. I think I'm ready to head to space, man. I've been doing my zero gravity training. I'm feeling good. Will you send me blast me off here?
Everyone hold on. Keep your hands and feet inside the ride, please. And we'll commence now. This is how the sausage is made, guys. Peter is getting his wardrobe ready to go. What do you think? Should this be the show now? Just Peter gets dressed for an active corner? I think this is the way that we should do it, to be honest. I don't know if we should even talk about the slate getting flipped on its head. Peter, are you ready?
I am ready.
Go ahead.
Guys, I just made it to outer space. I'm getting the Schefter, the Rappaport bombs up here, and the bombs are going off. Ezekiel Elliott is inactive today. We were talking about that game earlier. Tony Pollard is in line for 18 plus touches today. I just made that projection off the top of my head. I can do whatever I want. I'm in space. Tony Pollard should bring down Leonard Fournette's ownership. We were just talking about him. The other big bombshell with the slate being flipped on its head is half of the Miami Dolphins team is out. No Mike Gesicki, no Jakeem Grant, no Devontae Parker. This makes Lynn Bowden Jr. now one of the premier value plays on the slate. He should be locked and loaded in your lineup. What else do we have going on? Someone told me DeForest Buckner is active. James told me it doesn't matter, but I feel obligated to tell you that DeForest Buckner is active. What else do we got? You kind of already know some of the other news. Matthew Stafford's going to play. Jimmy Graham's going to play. I'm looking at my sheet. Damian Harris is out. You're never going to see Joe Mixon play again. You're never going to see Julian Edelman play again. You're never going to see Kenny Golladay play again. Okay, Ronald Jones isn't playing, all right? It's not happening. No Antonio Gibson. Okay, what else do we have here? I think that's it. Send me back to Earth. Send me back to Earth, Jordan.
Safe and sound.
James, I made it.
Yeah, you did. You forgot the Mark Ingram healthy scratch.
Oh, I can't go back. I can't go back.
It's
I can't
too
do
much.
That again.
It's too much.
Thank you for telling me. Mark Ingram, healthy scratch, wheels up. J.K. Dobbins. Let's segue right. Well, let's circle back real quick on the Tony Pollard thing before we talk about the Dolphins game. Where are you at on Tony Pollard now?
Yeah, he's a really, really good play. In the same way that Leonard Fournette is a good play, Tony Pollard is going to be a good play. And the Cowboys really like to run the ball in the red zone as well. So I think that Tony Pollard, you could probably play a lot of Leonard Fournette and Tony Pollard lineups and have a lot of upside for some cheap running backs.
Yep. I'm with you there. And if you still want to go the Fournette route, you're going to get him probably 5 percentage points less than he was 5 minutes ago.
I would guess he's not over like 15% owned in any contest at this point. I didn't even know if he was going to be higher than 20%. He might be like 10% owned now.
What's our Tony Pollard estimate for ownership across the slate, guys?
So what I will say, James, is I think it's going to be very buy-in level specific, right? The higher the buy-in you go, the higher owned Tony Pollard is going to be. So like I play in the SPY and stuff, I'm going to guess he comes in around 25% there. If you're playing in the $1,500 single entry game changer, it's probably going to be 45 or 50% there. Does that sound about right to you?
Higher. I mean, whenever we get these inactives, when you have really cheap running backs that we know are going to be value early on in the week, their ownership kind of peters off towards the end when new value starts to come out. So Tony Pollard with breaking news an hour and a half for the slate, people are just going to jam him in and fit whoever they want. So I think we see a rise in Derrick Henry ownership. I think that we see a rise in Alvin Kamara ownership. And I think that Tony Pollard probably ends up being like 30-something% in the Millie Maker and 50% plus in the higher dollar stuff.
All right, I just had to head to Twitter to let everyone know that the slate has indeed been flipped on its head. I am now just a monkey with a miniature symbol, and people tell me to bang it together, and I will do it. I will always oblige them and do that. Let's talk about this game here with all of these inactives. We got the Patriots versus Dolphins. I only have the stuff from a little while ago, so I don't know if this line has changed at all. We have the Dolphins as 1.5-point favorites, over under 41.5. But there are no weapons left on this Dolphins team. James here, do you have any lean on the bets now that we have all these inactive news?
The under, just hella under on everything that you can possibly bet on this game. Like, Tua isn't a high upside quarterback. He's a game manager that is kind of elevated by the receivers around him, and now he's going to have Lynn Bowden Jr., who is, there's one person in the industry who actually knows who Lynn Bowden Jr. is, and that's Anthony Amica. He's the only guy that knows who Lynn Bowden is, and I'm sure that he's just stoked today. Outside of that, like, there's really nothing in this game.
Yeah. This game is very gross. Even before the news, I had Lynn Bowden already in a couple of my lineups. So this is kind of like the Leonard Fournette inactive last week, where I was already playing Ronald Jones and then the ownership just gets steamed on it. So don't necessarily love that. But yes, Bowden is going to be a great play. I'm with you. I heard someone earlier ask if they could use Sony Michel. Like, at this point with Pollard opening up, I think Fournette's a better play than Michel. Can you make any case for using him or James White with Damian Harris out?
Not in this game. I mean, if it was going to be a competitive game, if it was going to be something where the Patriots were trailing, then I would have interest in James White. But this game just sucks, man. I wouldn't be surprised if this game ends like 12-10 or something.
Yeah. With you here too. I think both of these teams are going to want to play slow, not a lot of talent for explosive plays to speed things up. This is a stay away game for me here, other than maybe scooping up some of that value that has now funneled over to Lynn Bowden here. Let's move on over now to these 4 p.m. games. We have 3 of them here. The first one, we have the Cardinals versus the Eagles. Cardinals 6.5-point favorites, over under 49.5. Kyler and Jalen Hurts both projecting well for DFS purposes. Do you have a lean in the betting markets here, James?
Yeah, kind of like the over here. I think that both of these offenses, if you have 2 rushing quarterbacks going up against each other, I think there's some fireworks that can certainly fly. It just depends on the efficiency of the Eagles for me. I don't know that Jalen Hurts is actually the answer to this offense, but he did run a whole lot last week. And I think that's going to continue. I think he's going to continue to be a mobile quarterback. So I do like the over in this game.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. For DFS purposes here, it does look like Kyler and Jalen Hurts will be fairly popular, but nothing too out of control, I would say. DeAndre Hopkins is going to catch a little bit of ownership. No one knows what to do with the Philadelphia weapons. I don't know what to do with the pass catchers, although Miles Sanders is a little intriguing to me as a contrarian tournament option, kind of in the same vein as DeAndre Swift. Do you have any other pieces of this game you like?
I do really like a skinny stack with DeAndre Hopkins and Kyler Murray. And I just don't think that you need to bring it back with anybody from the Eagles. The Eagles, I'm just going to kind of treat as like the diet Ravens right now, because that's what Jalen Hurts is. He's diet Lamar Jackson to me. The problem is that there's really no pass catcher for the Eagles that you can kind of slot into the Mark Andrews role or into the Marquise Brown role or, any of that kind of thing. So I do like using Murray and Hopkins. When Murray is healthy, he's going to run a lot, and it looks like he's healthy, so the upside is there. Outside of that, I like Kenyon Drake a lot. He does have 20-plus rushing attempts in 2 of his last 3 games, and he's somebody who can take advantage of that kind of thing, especially if the Eagles are going to be inefficient on the offensive side of the ball. Then it should give a lot of carries over to Kenyon Drake.
Yeah, and Kenyon Drake was one of those guys early in the week I thought was going to be way more popular, but between all of this news opening up, specifically with Tony Pollard in that same range, I assume Kenyon Drake's ownership is going to come way down. I also think he's a nice piece to leave yourself open with some late swap flexibility. That's one of the things I was talking about earlier, getting the information from these early games. And then if you are loaded up on those cheap pieces in the Saints game we're about to talk about here that are going to be really popular, you can pivot over to guys like Kenyon Drake, Christian Kirk, even a Philadelphia pass catcher here if you're behind and need to catch up. Anything else I'm forgetting here before we move on?
I do like Miles Sanders. I like Miles Sanders specifically because he's going to be way less owned than Cam Akers and Jonathan Taylor and kind of those guys in that range. So at his price, we know that rushing QBs can help the efficiency and the upside of running backs on a team. So Jalen Hurts probably helps unlock a lot of the running lanes for Miles Sanders, and that's been something that he's struggled with. So I do like him a lot.
Yep. Let's go
hey, Pete, before we move on, how do you think the ownership in that range is going to be affected by this Pollard news? Are we going to see the stuff from Taylor, maybe Akers, maybe a little Dobbins? Are we going to see that crater, or do we think that's going to stay relatively static at our between 11 and 17% respectively for ownership?
Yeah, I mean, my gut is it continues to push people towards more of these studs and duds constructions. I could see people getting up to Pollard over Fournette for people kind of like me who don't want to play Fournette. And I do think it could bring down the mid-tier guys like Jonathan Taylor's ownership a little bit. Don't you think, James, the three most popular guys now would be Henry, Kamara, and Pollard would be like the three kind of core plays for people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Pollard is going to make people feel a lot more comfortable with the roster construction of having Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara with Pollard, or having one of the other with Pollard. So I definitely think that those three are still going to be like the highest owned. I don't think this really affects that mid-range very much. I think that we see less J.K. Dobbins. I think that we see less Kenyon Drake. I think that we see less of those guys kind of in the 5 to low 6K range. Just because people aren't going to go there. They're just going to pay down farther and go to Tony Pollard instead. So, I think that mid-range is probably going to stay about the same.
Okay, sounds good. Let's move on to this Los Angeles Rams, New York Jets game. This is another one of those games where it's pretty cut and dry for DFS. Cam Akers is going to be fairly popular, although, again, I think he might have his ownership come down a bit with this shakeup. But other than that, not a lot getting used here. I've loved attacking this Jets team here. The line currently is the Rams favored by, let me find my notes here. I'm now discombobulated. They are 16.5 point favorites, over under 44.5. Do you have the stomach to take the points here?
I'd rather side with the Jets. 16 points is a lot, man. That's a lot for a professional football team. We have seen like the Patriots cover things like that in the past. I think against the Jets, I'm pretty sure they were like 20-point favorites against the Jets. But I hate this. I hate this spot because I don't like big favorites, but I'd rather take the Jets.
Yeah. I have some interest in this. I enjoy picking on the Jets secondary. Their run defense is better than their pass defense. I think the Rams are going to have success throwing. To me, looking at the ownership, it just sets up as a perfect Akers fade for me in using the pass game. But I'm a sicko. Talk me off of fading Akers and using some kind of combination of Jared Goff and, dare I say, a Jets bring back.
I do. Okay, so the Jets bring back is the part that I will not approve of, just because I don't think you need to do it. And I've had this kind of discussion with my community over the last couple of weeks where if you're facing a super inefficient team, you don't have to have a bring back, because there are likely, even if the Jets are passing in the second half, it doesn't mean they're going to complete any of their passes. And they'll probably just run Frank Gore into the ground in the second half anyway. So I don't think you need the bring back, but I'm fine with the Rams passing game here, and especially over Akers. I don't actually think Akers is that good of a play. He's not been very efficient this year by any means. He averages somewhere around 0.65 fantasy points per touch, which is like David Montgomery levels, and people would not be excited about playing David Montgomery most of the time, except for the last 2 weeks. So when you have a really inefficient player, even if he gets 20 plus carries, if he has a 0.65 fantasy points per touch, you're only expecting a median of like 16, 17 fantasy points, even in a good spot. So I'm not into Cam Akers. I do really like Robert Woods. He's seen 8+ targets in 4 of the last 5 games, and he's kind of taken over the volume role. He's better on a fantasy points per touch basis than Cooper Kupp as well. So I don't mind the passing game here at all.
Yep. I'm with you there. And I was looking into Woods and Kupp, and it does look like Woods has kind of started to pull away as far as earning more targets in this offense. So yeah, give me the $200 extra there and take Robert Woods. I like that. Let's move on to this last game, the marquee game of the week. It's going to catch a ton of ownership in DFS circles. I like that it comes last though, so it can give us time to make late swaps as necessary. We have the Saints here as 2.5 point home underdogs here, over under 53.5. Do you like a side or total here?
Yeah, give me the Chiefs. Like just every single week, if the Chiefs are even within like 3 points of another team, just take the Chiefs. And that's my secret to any kind of success with the Chiefs is just take the Chiefs.
Yep. And as far as DFS goes, because of Michael Thomas getting ruled out and because of Drew Brees coming back into the lineup, we've seen some pretty significant ownership movements. Alvin Kamara has gone from a guy who is going to be maybe like the 6th or 7th highest owned guy on the slate to the highest owned guy on the slate. We had Emmanuel Sanders, Traquan Smith, and Jared Cook all jump big time in ownership. And of course, everyone always knows the offense is so concentrated around Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill that they are always smash plays. So how are you thinking about attacking this game, knowing we don't have, any mega leverage spots?
So this is a pretty interesting one because we know who all of the main players are in this game, right? Like we know that it's Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Alvin Kamara, Emmanuel Sanders, Jared Cook. Like we know who the guys are that are going to be getting the targets and getting the fancy points. The one wild card here is Drew Brees. Everybody else is getting pretty massive ownership. Drew Brees is still projecting for only around 5% ownership. So if people are going to be taking Alvin Kamara, if people are going to be taking Emmanuel Sanders, and especially if they're going to be taking both of them without Drew Brees, I think that's kind of a mistake. And with that being said, if this game actually goes off the way that it's supposed to, then both sides are going to be passing a lot. And Drew Brees is only 5,900 on DraftKings. Like he's pretty cheap, all things considered. You can go with a New Orleans stack and go with Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, and Emmanuel Sanders and bring it back with one of Travis Kelce or Tyreek Hill and have a much more cost-efficient way to getting the upside of this game than stacking the Chiefs side, which if you stack Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce, you use literally half of your entire salary on DraftKings. It's disgusting. It's hard to do. It's going to be easier now with Pollard, but I like the Saints side more.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Again, this is one of those things where I'm just thankful that it's in the 4 p.m. slot. Because if this was in the 1 p.m., it's so hard to attack. But I can build my Watson teams. I can build my Tannehill teams. Depending on how those go, I can decide how much of this chalk I want to eat. Do you have preferences on, say, of those 3 cheap Saints guys, Cook, Sanders, and then Traquan Smith? When you factor in price and ownership and projection, is any one of those 3 emerging from the others?
I probably like Cook more if I'm just using a secondary correlation. If I'm stacking this team, then I need to have Emmanuel Sanders, just because I don't think that you're really losing anything by going with Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, and Emmanuel Sanders. Like very few people are going to have that combination. So I think that you're already unique enough and have enough relative value on just Drew Brees alone. But if I'm doing a secondary stack, then Jared Cook makes a lot of sense, taking up the tight end position, being something they like to use in the red zone when they don't have Michael Thomas. He would probably be my favorite secondary play.
All right, guys, you know what we're doing? I'm being a little selfish. We are wrapping up here a little bit early because I need to go and redo lineups. We have tilt space lineups to make. Our buddy Michael Leone, as you guys all know, he is competing for $2.5 million today in the Fantasy Football World Championship. We are going to have 3 teams in the big $1,500 Millie Maker contest. So it is going to be a fun day here on the tilt space at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. And of course, James McCool, you got pay dirt stuff going. You got the Twitch, you got the Discord. Let the people know where they can find all the good stuff.
Yeah, you can find me over at paydirt_DFS over on Twitter, and then my site, paydirt.ghost.io. I'm going to go run all of my models, and I have ownership and the free opportunity search tool, which you can find on the site, as well as a free air yard search tool. So I got a lot of updates to make as well, and a community to take care of, and hopefully we can end up binking on this slate.
That's right. Thank you all for tuning in. I know we are all now in need of frantically changing our lineups. Shout out to Joel Holka and Dieter, who couldn't be with us today, but we soldiered on. We went to space and back. We tackled the news. We tackled the betting slate. That's what we do here on the Line Movement YouTube channel. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button on your way out. We will see you at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For James McCool, for Pete Overzet, this is Line Movement Pre-Kickoff Show. We'll see you guys at 6:30.